And so this is the last session. This is the concluding session for this series. Now the objective here is, I've had a couple of people ask for very specific things around the traps that they'd like me to kind of talk about again. So there will be a little bit of a break, but my intention is to come back. So whether it's like this and it's a series of things, or whether it's just the occasional thing here or there, I'll work that out later. So to wrap up this current series though, the idea of actually talking about anxiety. Today's session, two parts to it. The first part is around committed actions, which, ACT, acceptance, commitment therapy. The commitment part's kind of important, let's be honest. So at least the initial part will be talking about that. And then we will do. I've decided we're going to do this. There'll be a wrap up. We're going to do this kind of wrap up and just go over some of the key points and where things are, kind of a little bit of where do we go from here, just that whole kind of sense, right? So the thing that we want to be very conscious of when we're talking about committed actions, right? Committed actions, they've got to be aligned to things like your values. So we talked a little bit last week about values. We talked about kind of the goal setting and how to increase that sense of the values. To make a committed action, that's why I've labeled this one, committing to yourself. I think I called it that. Hopefully I've called it committing to yourself. That's what it's supposed to be called. Committed actions, they need to be around that values base. How to kind of decide whether an action is somehow aligned to values, whether it's a conscious thing or just kind of happens anyway. If you've ever said at any point in time, I want to change, I want things to be different. Actually, no, that's the key part, right? Because anytime you've said I want to, there's already a little part there where you're already stepping into that path or that mode of committed actions, right? There's a very distinct difference between I don't want to be doing this and I want to change. I want to do things differently. I want to be able to go out. It's something I talk with clients a lot. When I say to somebody, sorry, I'm going to try that again, but this time it will be in English. When I'm talking to clients and I ask, what would you like things to be like? A lot of people that I work with will say, I don't want to be, or I want to be less. I want to be less sad. I don't want to be worried all the time. When we talk about the less and the don't want to be, what we're talking about at that point in time is I'm wanting the absence of something. When we talk about ACT, especially the commitment part of ACT, it's really hard to commit to the absence of something. And so committed actions is about the future. It's about what I'm going to do. And so when I do ask that question and somebody says, I don't want to be, my usual response, and there's at least a couple of people that I've worked with out there who are just kind of going, oh, you're an ass. Because I will usually say something along the lines of, cool, so that's what you're not, or that's what you don't want to be doing. Now tell me what you do want to do. Because committed actions is all about, I want to change, I want to do things differently. There's an element of kind of a future focus to it. One of the things, and as I say, like a lot of the time for people to say, I want to do things differently, I want to change, I want to be a better, I want to. You are already on that path. And I always like to highlight how important it is that you don't underestimate the things that you are already doing. Even wanting to change is a step further along that path of being the person that you want, having that meaningful engagement, than if you are just sitting in that spot of, it's too hard, never mind, everything's okay, it doesn't matter, all of those kind of things that your anxiety will be trying to convince you of. So never underestimate the things you're already doing. So there are a couple of acronyms, that's the word, I knew it would come back to me. There's a couple of acronyms that we want to talk about when we're talking about committed actions. The first one of those is barrier, and the second one is whatever the opposite of a barrier is. Let's go with antidote. I don't think antidote's the word I'm looking for, but I'm just going to go with that because otherwise you'll just be sitting here staring at me as I think for the next 3 minutes. So barrier, antidote. The acronym for the barrier that we have to committed actions is fear. Not fear the emotion, funnily enough. Fear as a representation of 4 separate things. So fear stands for fusion, excessive goals, and I'll come back to that in a second, avoidance of discomfort, and remoteness from values. Right, so fusion hopefully is a concept that we're really familiar with by now. Fusion is the idea of being involved, being in something. So what is a barrier to me being able to make change, to make committed actions, is being fused with my current situation, being fused with the rules for my life. The second barrier that can get into committed actions is excessive goals. Now, we talked a little bit last week about values and goals being those things that are kind of objectives, things that I want to work towards, things that I can, we talked about SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. I will go back into that a little bit kind of in the wrap up, so if you missed those 5, it's all right, they'll come back. When I talk about the sense of excessive goals, there's a little part of me that kind of talks really about the A and the R in SMART, achievable, realistic. And if you'll remember last week, that refers to can I do it versus will I do it. When we make excessive goals, when I spend a lot of the time making goals, setting up this huge list of things that I want to achieve, firstly, that can become really overwhelming. Secondly, how much of that is realistic? How much of setting these goals, and maybe they're all individually realistic, but if I make excessive numbers of them, at what point in time am I then overcommitting? Am I then creating the sense of, I want to achieve these goals, but I can't now because there are so many. And so while individually I look at all of these, they're all achievable, they're all absolutely doable. And by themselves, they're all realistic. I will do them all. Collectively, it's just too much. I'm floundering at that point. So that's excessive goals. We want goal setting, but excessive goal setting is going to be a barrier for us. Avoidance of discomfort. We've talked a lot about that in the emotion kind of live stream. And the avoidance of the discomfort, that's that sense of I can't sit with it. I have to push it away. If I am frustrated by something that's occurring, I give up because I'm trying to avoid that discomfort or frustration. If I try something and it doesn't go how I want it to, I'm then disappointed. Well, then I'm just going to give up, or I'm going to go the other direction because that's avoiding discomfort. And what happens is we kind of step back from that, and it almost becomes, well, if I do that and it doesn't work, I will feel this. I don't want to feel that. I'm not even going to put a step in the right place. I'm not even going to try that action because of the possibility of there being some disappointment or some frustration, and I'm so desperate to avoid that discomfort that I don't even make the step in that direction. And the last one being kind of remoteness from values. And that's that initial piece that I spoke about, right? Any committed action, we want it to be aligned with our values. We need to have it connected to our values. Because otherwise, why are we doing it? Not a rhetorical question in this case. Tell the camera. Sometimes when we hear things out loud, we process it differently. Why would you do something that isn't part of your values? That isn't attached to what you want and the person you want to be? So, the barriers to committed actions. Fear, right? To wrap that up again, fear. Fusion, excessive goals, avoidance of discomfort, and remoteness from values. So, the antidote to fear. Ooh, see what I did there? The antidote to fear is dare. Now this is going to be fun because I'm going to say fair and dear at some point in time. I'm going to confuse those, that's right. Fear and dare. So when we dare, we break down that fear. Man, this is getting complicated. It might not be complicated for you, but I'm throwing these words and I'm going to screw them up in a minute. So, dare stands for diffusion, acceptance of discomfort, realistic goals, and embracing values. It is almost the diametric opposition. It's the complete opposite of fear. We defuse from things. If I'm going to commit to an action, I need to be able to diffuse from the sense of right and wrong, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't want an emotion attached to that committed action. I don't want to fuse and to join with any of the beliefs and the absolute truths that I have. I'm going to do this action. I kind of need to step back from that and go, okay, this is an action. This is what I'm trying to achieve. I can step back from that. I can hold it. I can hold it lightly. I think that was the exact term we're talking about with diffusion. I can hold it lightly and continue on that action. Acceptance of discomfort. When I do this action, I may be frustrated at times. It may prompt some level of guilt if I'm doing something that feels different to me because maybe I've decided I'm going to do this and I was never shown how to do that, or I was never told that that's an okay action from my parents or my friends or social media. But that'll tie into the values in a minute. So I'm going to have to accept that there's possibly going to be some discomfort here. Realistic goals, that ties us back into, right, the will I do it component of goal setting. There's no point in making a committed action to something that you deep down know you're not going to. And then embracing your values. So in this, the acceptance of discomfort and the embracing values, those are the two that, to my mind at least, go very hand in hand at this point. Because the action I want to commit to has to align enough with my values that it is worth feeling the discomfort. So there's this complex web of interlinked stuff going on at that point. However, I would suggest, if you're making a commitment to an action, if you're talking about that very first sentence or the very first bit that I said, right? I want to do this. This is something I want to do. If you want to do something, there is a value in it, or it aligns with your values, right? Nobody says I want to do this because it makes me feel terrible and I don't actually like people who do that. It's kind of not how things work. So there's going to be, doesn't have to be, there's going to be just underneath that an inherent level of value or connection with my values that are there for me to want to do something. And so at that point in time, that's my values. That's lined up. This is the thing that I believe is the person I want to be. I'm going to have to, again, I've got to stop using that word. It will be more helpful for me to be able to manage discomfort, to get through that, to get to the action, to get to the outcome that I know tells me and is aligned with the person that I want to be. So, fear and dare. Fear is the barrier, and when we dare to do something, that's the antidote to that fear. So, the other kind of key part when we're talking about committed actions, right? When you commit to an action, and this is coming a little bit into that kind of a lot of the time when I've kind of been talking about this idea of we have this word or this thing that I think comes into my system or comes in, and then I believe it means, or this is what I understand by it. And so hopefully, I had this conversation all those weeks back. Acceptance is a classic example, because when people say, oh, you have to accept it, what they're saying is, you've got to be okay with it, you've got to like it, you've got to, this has to be fine for you. And it doesn't. Acceptance is not about being okay with it. Acceptance is about being okay with not being okay. Acceptance is about it's happening, and I can't change that it's happening. I need to accept rather than immerse myself, bury myself into the bad feelings. I know, bad, I use words that I don't like. Occasionally it happens, sorry. So this idea again, right? Commitment, committing to actions. A lot of the times when people say you've got to commit to it, there's almost a sense there of it's got to be perfect. Or you can't take a back step, right? If you've committed to doing this, you've got to follow through. You've got to complete this. Committed actions doesn't mean you have to push through until completion. Committed actions means I am making a committed choice. I am choosing to carry through with this action. And what will generally happen is I will make that commitment. I will probably break that commitment at some point in time. Just small break maybe, something won't go according to plan. I'll give you an example in a second. So I will break that commitment. Where things often fall down, if we're not doing this from a perspective of act, if I'm not doing this from a perspective of the observing self, if I'm not doing this from a perspective of the acceptance and the holding it lightly, when I break that commitment, I will give up. I will walk away. I will probably tell myself a whole heap of very horrible things about who I am as a person, but I will not continue with that. I will step back. What we want is I make that commitment, and at some point in time, that commitment is broken. If not broken, maybe bent, right? It doesn't have to be a kind of break, but it doesn't go according to plan. Something gets in the road, I don't follow through with that. What we want to do from that point is to take a figurative or sometimes literal breath. I've made this commitment to this action. That didn't go according to plan. Okay, let me just pause. Let me stop. What did I learn from that? What information can I take from that? I didn't factor in this. I didn't think about that. I was maybe a little less realistic about whether I would do that. Okay, now I'm going to recommit. Now I'm going to go back to that and making the commitment again, but I'm going to make the commitment with the learning and the understanding that I've just got. Mistakes, they're a positive thing. They're actually usually helpful, because mistakes suggest to us, maybe you didn't factor that thing in. So when we are talking about committed actions, the idea is not A, B, C, D, E, finish at F. See, I even did that, finish at F, like F for finish. What committed actions actually is A, B, C, Q, B, C, Z, B, C, D, E, L, C, D, E, maybe if we're lucky, F. And that is what committed action looks like. If I asked you, when you tried to learn a new skill, did you master it straight away? Now there'll be some of you who'll go, actually I did. Awesome, fantastic. For a vast majority of people, no, that's not how it works. When I moved from New Zealand to Australia, at some point in time, as I think everybody who comes to Australia has to do, I decided to try footy. Very topical for the grand final tomorrow. Ooh, the New Zealander who went to footy. I didn't go to footy, I tried footy. I sucked at it. And a lot of it came down to skills that I had learnt playing in New Zealand, how to kick a ball. You kick a ball in a certain way playing rugby that is very different to how you kick a ball playing footy, which is very different to how you kick a ball playing football or soccer, right? So there's these different kind of skill sets. Now in that instance, playing footy didn't really fit my values particularly. I had values that were met through that interaction, social interaction, kind of fitness, being part of something bigger. So there were certainly some values that were in there. But that particular action, it didn't meet all of my values. It wasn't enough, right? It wasn't enough for me. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. I'm going to come back to that in the review, right? I'm using that whole wrong, right, good, bad stuff. But it wasn't the thing that aligned strongly enough with my values that meant I wanted to commit to that through the discomfort. Fear, dare, right? I could accept the discomfort, but the acceptance of the discomfort had to be close enough, or the discomfort, the continued action, had to be aligned enough with my values to make me want to do that. Didn't help that I injured myself later that year as well, but that's not the point. Off topic train, toot toot, yeah, I know. But the point around the committed actions, right? I didn't just pick up a footy ball, and know how to kick it and do it fantastically. If that had been something that I was committed to doing, I was committed to doing this for various reasons, and there would be various reasons you would. I would have not kicked it accurately. I would have kicked it the way that you kick a rugby ball. I would have hit it with the part of my foot. It's much more about a soccer ball. I wouldn't have then gone, too hard, walked away, if this was strongly connected to my values. I would have needed to have, or the ideal situation would have been, I would then take that step back and I'd go, right, what did I do? What did I do that's not working? Okay, see, I did this and I did this, so I didn't set myself up correctly. I didn't do enough running. I don't know. I've got better examples, but unfortunately I'm rolling with this one now. I would then go back and I would reattempt it. I would learn, I would have another go. And that would be a constant process. And this is the thing about committed actions. Committed actions has to be, really, prefaced by a sense of, I want to. On another kind of off topic, I love the fact that I'm not even sure I've come back from my original off topic, but I'm going to do another one. Parents, oh parents. You can't make your child do anything. Trust me, you've met my attempt at making her do things, clean your room. Yeah, we can't make anybody do anything. Because even if, and I'll use my own child and I'll use cleaning the room because that is a constant struggle. Even if I have imparted in her this strong connection with values of being tidy and organized and clean and uncluttered, the reality is I'm giving her those, she doesn't have to accept them, right? We're going back to the values. Values last week. You can get given values. You don't have to agree with them, you don't have to hold on to them. She doesn't, at the moment, hold on to my belief about structure and tidy and whatever else. So when she committed, in small c, to an action and started to go through it, when something went wrong, when something didn't go according to the plan, there's no value there that she holds, so she just stopped. Your children will always be like that. If you want them to do something, they have to want to do it themselves. It's one of the biggest frustrations with anybody in general, not just children, anybody, but especially with children. If they don't want to do something, it's going to be really hard to get them to do it. You might get them to do the actions, but they're certainly not going to be committed actions. They're not going to be something that they are choosing to do, that they want to do. There's all kinds of little tricks about how you try and convince the child that they want to do it, but that is neither here nor there. And they don't involve hypnotism, just to be clear. Threats don't work either. So that's kind of the wrap up on this committed action kind of stuff I want to talk about, okay? Remembering the key parts of committed action is you need to want to do it. For it to be a committed action, it's got to be a choice. It's got to be something that I want to do. The things that will get in the road is fusion, excessive goals, setting up too many of them, avoidance of discomfort, and remoteness from my values. And the antidote to those barriers is dare. Diffusion, acceptance of discomfort, realistic goals, will I do this? And embracing those values. And when you commit to an action, understand that sometimes that commitment will waver, that commitment will break. That is not the end of it. That is merely a point where I get to step back and I get to go, okay, what did I learn from that? What has this taught me or told me? And how will I use that when I recommit to this action? So the review, the overall, this will hopefully be relatively short. Give me a second. Yes, I was just checking my time because I do have another meeting I'm supposed to go to after this. This will be relatively concise, with the idea that obviously you can go back. These are on Facebook now. They will always be on Facebook. They may even transition across to YouTube. I don't know. I'm not the tech person. I don't really understand how it works a lot of the time. This is kind of a resource that will sit here. You'll be able to kind of go through it and see how all these things connect. But in its snapshot, nutshell version, the elevator pitch, if you will, the key kind of components that we've looked across. First of all, we looked at what anxiety is. We talked about anxiety. We brought in that sense of the fight, flight reflex. We talked about the fact that when anxiety kicks in, it has a purpose. It has a function. It's doing something for you. And we talked about the sense of control. How people have this there's this outside belief coming into us that we need to control our emotions, we need to control everything, and it's all about control. And it's not about control. Controlling your emotions, it's a myth. What we want to do instead is to notice those emotions. And that led us a little bit, at least, into the idea of these traps. It was kind of the cognitive traps or the thinking traps. And I've generalized it out to just the traps in general for all the kind of stuff that's not fantastic, it's not helpful, it's not the things that we want to do. So the traps where we talked about the idea of bias, this idea of a weighted belief. And the example I invariably would have used, because it's my favorite one, is confirmation bias. I see the things that I expect to see. And all that does is wipe out the things that I didn't expect to see. And all that does is reinforce my bias and create more of a bias. So we've got to be careful about that. We've got to be careful about the weighted beliefs and perceptions that I hold. The trap, looking for the deficit, looking for the threat, that was that real thinking trap. That was the find food, find shelter, don't get eaten, cave person type stuff. So the idea of this trap is similar to the confirmation bias. I don't even focus on the things that are working for me. I don't focus on the positives. I don't focus on the things that are helping me because they're not the threat. Anxiety wants to create the system where I'm constantly looking for the threats because that's the thing that will kill me. The crudes, and they died, right? Hopefully I use that in this, and that's not just what I talk to clients. Otherwise, you're all sitting there going, what is he talking about? The guy's nuts. Not entirely incorrect. However, we talked about the thinking self. The commentary on your life, the evaluations, the judgments, the I should haves that are attached to all of that, right? That thinking self where it's all up here and it's all tied into looking for the deficit, looking for the threat. It's tied into all of those kind of thinking traps. We talked about the idea of fusion with the absolute truth, fusion with the fact that the beliefs that I hold, the beliefs that I've been given, The beliefs that I tell myself are completely and utterly black and white and absolute. And we talked about the whole system of the words that we use. Good, bad, right, wrong, setting up this kind of structure and issue internally that tells me that there's a black or a white, an either or an or, that absolute truth, right? Tying back into that kind of fusion with stuff. And then we've talked a lot about the helpful processes, the things on the other side of that, right? There's the traps. I tried to think of an analogy, I really did. I came up with ladders. I thought about toolkit. I don't know. There's a cool analogy there, and I've missed it. So I'm just calling it the helpful processes. The observing self. The part of us that notices, that is able to just sort of walk beside whatever's going on. Is able to sit with it and observe it. We just notice it, we observe it. We don't have to get involved in it. We talked about diffusion. Fusion, absolute truth. Diffusion, holding it lightly. It still exists, still here. But I don't need to hold it here. I can diffuse from that, I can hold it lightly and still engage with all the meaningful things around me. The people, the activities. We talked about emotions as clouds. The idea that they come and they go. I made the terrible joke about trying to catch a cloud, but I missed. These are not things we can hold on to. And in ACT, we're not just talking about, I want to push away the negative. I also don't want to try and hold on to the positive because they're all just clouds. I need to be able to sit with the fact that they will come and they will go. And I want to create space to allow those comfortable, helpful, nice feeling emotions in. But in that space, there will occasionally be some discomfort. And we've got to work with that. We've got to allow that to exist. We talked about that terminology, right? There is no good, bad, right, wrong. There is helpful and there is comfortable. Because I want to be able to look at things and decide if this is helping me to get somewhere or it's not helping me. Things that are good cannot help me achieve things. And likewise, is this uncomfortable or is it comfortable? Because a lot of things that we need to do in order to engage with that meaningful side of us, to connect with those values, to be the person we want to be, that is going to be uncomfortable. Discomfort is not bad. Discomfort, it just is. And we did some very specific processes around grounding. We talked about mindfulness. We talked about the thought moving, the allowing thoughts to just move on their own accord. I'm going to release that thought and it can do what it wants to do. I'm not pushing it away. I'm just releasing it. I'm giving it the space to do what it needs to do. We talked a bit about kind of the concept of self. So we don't talk about self-esteem, remember, because that has all this loading attached to it. We talked about concept of self, with the idea of that being the diffusion is the key part of the concept of self, right? Concept of self doesn't have to be, it's not about it being negative or positive. It's about it being relevant to me. It's about the things that I know that I do, while also being able to hold that it may not be all the things that other people want me to do. But my concept of self has to be attached to it. It doesn't have to, though. I'll stop using has to be. It is more beneficial to us if when I hold my concept of self, that it's not, it doesn't have to be agreed with. I think that's the way that I described it, right? I can hold what somebody believes about me or what I believe about myself, but I don't have to agree with it. It's a little bit like I said, the whole clean the room stuff, right? I can present these values to my daughter. I can present these values to my wife. I can present these values to anybody. But I can't, it's not up to me to tell you you've got to agree with them. And even our internal concept of self, we've kind of got to be the same. I can hold what you say about me, but I don't have to agree with it. If I think it is unjust, if I think it is unfair, I can push that away and go, you believe that about me? I know that's not true. And I think we talked about the idea of having a healthy concept of self, which is exactly that. I can receive negatives that are relevant and are true, and I can receive praise and positives that are true, but I can also knock back the negatives that are untrue, that are not accurate, and I can knock back the positives that I don't believe are warranted, are true. I don't know. I probably explained it way better at the time. And we talked just last week about the idea of values, the idea of having qualities, having the qualities I want, the direction that I'd like to go in, the person that I want to be, engaging in the activities that show me I am the kind of person I want to be. And part of that we do by looking at kind of those emotions, the happiness, the pride, feeling fulfilled, and exploring that more in terms of, okay, what about that situation? What about that experience that I had really generated those emotions? Because those are the things that will tell me what my values are. Those are the things that will help me understand and explore where I find value and who I want to be and what I see myself as. And we wrapped up that session with a bit about the goals. Like I said, I was coming back to the SMART goals, so remembering the SMART goals, specific. I need to nail it down. Measurable, got to be able to tell if I'm getting there. Achievable, can I do it? Is it possible to do? Realistic, will I do it? Let's be honest with myself. And timely, having an end time, having a way of measuring in a time based, because that's something that we can look at. And I talked a little bit about the idea of the two types of goals, the objective-based goals, what's my end result, and the process-based goals. I'm going to do these steps, I'm going to do these behaviors. That's the measurable part. That's how I'm going to work out whether or not I do that. So hopefully you have found this kind of series of live streams, of YouTube videos, of however you're seeing this medium. Hopefully you found these really helpful. If you have made any comments between the last session and this one, my apologies. I haven't had a chance to check the stream and check the comments and stuff. There will be a break for a few weeks. I've got various bits and pieces on Friday mornings. However, my intention is certainly to be back. My intention is, whether it's on a Friday morning or whether it's one evening or something, but I enjoy doing the live streams. I enjoy communicating with people and helping people find their own kind of meaning in stuff that I'm talking about. One of the things that, as I said, I've had a couple of topics raised. One of the things that I'm probably going to look at, and it's something that we do as an organisation here, we do that as well, around compassion, but specifically self-compassion. How do I love myself? How do I hold myself to be this person? The values, right? How do I hold myself to be this person that is aligned with my own values? I know that Women's Health and Wellbeing Services, we've got a program coming up. We're actually doing some work on compassion in the next kind of school term. My objective will be to do kind of just a little bit of live stream, little pieces of information. So I'm really interested in any topics that you'd like to hear about. Anything that from this series, or anything that as I've been talking has come up, let us know. They won't all necessarily be 45 minutes. Although, let's be honest, this is me. I can log on for 10 minutes and be here half an hour later. So, I don't know, we'll have to just allow me a little bit of leeway there. But they don't have to be huge topics. But I'd just be really interested in anything that you'd like me to talk about. And then, as I said, in a few weeks, once things kind of settle and new time frames and stuff get set up, I'd be more than happy to come back on and just have these kind of little regular interactions, little regular kind of conversations. So until you see my gigantic face on your screen again, it's been a pleasure to be able to kind of do these and to know that there are people who are kind of engaging with this stuff. And I really look forward to seeing you all through the camera. That's really weird. Anyway, I really look forward to being able to do more of these in the future. Thanks very much.